Welcome to This Explainer. You know, if you've been anywhere near the internet lately, you've definitely seen the football world absolutely buzzing about the World Cup final. We're talking about Argentina's massive heavyweight clash with Spain, and, well, more importantly, why the South American giants actually fell short. Today, we're breaking down a fascinating tactical analysis from our source material that pretty much completely flips the popular narrative on its head. Get ready because we're going to look really closely at the raw data and the actual tactics to figure out what really went down out there on the pitch.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is the question dominating social media right now. Seriously, you scroll through any feed and you're going to see this massive uproar claiming that Enzo Fernández's red card was the sole reason Argentina lost the game. There is a huge wave of raw emotion out there, with tons of fans feeling like the referee effectively just stole the World Cup final. But here's the thing. Our source material today challenges that emotional reaction head-on. They argue that blaming the official is basically just a massive cop-out. Let's see why they believe the real story is actually a whole lot deeper than a single refereeing decision.
Argentina was right in the thick of this final until the referee ruined it. You know, this sentiment perfectly captures what we can call the conventional wisdom of the match. It's the standard talking point you hear in every debate right now. But according to the analysis we're exploring today, this entire narrative is a total illusion. The source vigorously argues that the red card absolutely didn't ruin Argentina's chances, because, tactically speaking, those chances were already being completely dismantled from the opening whistle. To understand how they actually reached that conclusion, we have to look past the drama and focus strictly on the tactical setup that Lionel Scaloni brought to the biggest stage in football.
Section 1. The tactical surrender. Let's move to and see how this builds, because we're basically shifting our focus away from the red card excuses to look at how Argentina actually set up to play from minute one.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really stark contrast. Instead of their iconic heavyweight identity, that high-pressing, fluid transition game that made them world champions in the first place, Scaloni completely abandoned that identity, totally threw it out the window. They adopted a deeply passive low block, setting up like an old-school defensive team, desperately playing for penalties. The source argues they play with this terrified mindset, just completely surrendering their usual offensive firepower.
Now, for those of you maybe a bit newer to the tactical side of things, a low block is basically a defensive strategy, where a team sits very, very deep in their own territory. They prioritize defense over keeping the ball, all just to frustrate the opponent. It's kind of like building a brick wall right in front of your goal. But you might be wondering, why on earth would a defending champion do this? Well, the source attributes this massive defensive shift to physical reality. They note that Argentina was an aging squad running on absolute fumes after a brutal tournament path. Facing a Spanish side that was just brimming with youth, pace, and energy, the analysis suggests Argentina was, frankly, terrified of going toe-to-toe in an open transition game.
Which brings us to what the source describes as a highly cynical 120-minute gamble. Here's the three-step plan they believe Argentina actually employed. Step 1, sit deep and absorb pressure in that passive low block. Step 2, drag Spain into a messy, grueling contest for the full 120 minutes. And Step 3, dump all the pressure onto their goalkeeper, Emi Martinez, just praying his famous psychological warfare would save them in a penalty shootout. The ultimate conclusion drawn here is that Argentina was not actively trying to win a football match. They were strictly trying to just survive it.
Section 2. The statistical reality and positional collapse. Let's see how that survival mindset actually played out on the pitch.
So the crucial point is, it resulted in a complete structural failure, because they sat so incredibly deep, every time Argentina won the ball back, they had zero structural outlets. Alexis Mac Allister trapped in his own half. Rodrigo de Paul was just left exhausting himself chasing ghosts all over the midfield. And most shockingly, Lionel Messi was literally stranded, often 40 yards away from the nearest blue and white shirt. They effectively choked out their own offense.
Which leads us to this incredibly telling number right here, 0. The source points out a really crucial tactical twist that most people are completely ignoring in the post-match debate. Get this. Even before Enzo Fernández received his red card in the second half, Argentina had registered absolutely 0 progressive sequences in Spain's defensive third. Not a single one. This is used to argue that the red card absolutely didn't cause the collapse, it merely exposed a team that had already mentally and tactically surrendered the pitch.
And honestly, the stats just get more difficult to digest from there. 2. That's it. That is the total number of shots Argentina managed for the entire game. Just 2 shots in a World Cup final. For a team boasting some of the absolute greatest attacking talent in a generation, the source neutrally points to this as a totally devastating fact. It's the clear result of abandoning their fluid transition game.
But wait, this is the real narrative bombshell of the whole analysis. 0.04 expected goals, or XG. I really want you to let that microscopic number sink in for a second, 0.04. The source argues that this is the single most damning indictment of their performance. With an XG that miserably low, you could play this final 100 times and likely not score a single goal. The core argument here is that keeping 11 men on the pitch wouldn't magically fix a team that completely refused to pass the ball forward. It wasn't some refereeing robbery. The source claims it was a completely self-inflicted tactical disaster.
Moving on to Section 3, the Spanish Masterclass.
To get the full picture, we really have to look at how Luis de la Fuente's side capitalized on Argentina's passive setup. Spain's dominance was heavily reliant on the counterpress. If you aren't familiar, this is a super aggressive defensive tactic where a team tries to immediately regain possession high up the pitch directly after losing the ball. According to the source, Spain executed this perfectly. Anchored by Rodri in the center and just relentlessly driven by Fabian Ruiz, Spain's counterpress absolutely pinned Argentina in their own half. Because Argentina was already sitting in a low block, Spain's aggressive pressing meant the ball rarely ever left the Argentine defensive third.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the wide play factored in, and crucially, it wasn't a result of the red card. Nico Williams and Lamine Yamal were already tearing the flanks apart when it was strictly 11 versus 11. Why? Because Argentina's fullbacks had absolutely zero protection from their midfield, who were just trapped deep dealing with that Spanish counterpress. Spain dictated the tempo and dominated the half spaces right from the opening whistle.
And that brings us to our final section, a fatal survival mindset.
Bringing all these tactical pieces together really reveals a fundamental philosophical difference between the two squads. Argentina, battered, bruised, and weary of the Spanish youth, stepped onto the pitch playing to survive. Spain, meanwhile, stepped onto the pitch playing to win. The source concludes that Spain didn't rely on luck or refereeing decisions. Instead, their unmatched structural discipline forced Argentina into a tactical cage and essentially locked the door from the inside. They didn't steal the crown, they snatched it through sheer dominance to become the undisputed champions.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question pulled straight from our source material today. Did Scaloni completely blow the tactics, or was this Spanish side just destined for greatness? It's such a fascinating lens through which to view one of the biggest matches in recent history. I want you to take the tactical data, those crazy expected goals numbers, and the structural analysis we just walked through, and really think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning the conventional wisdom, and I'll catch you next time.